Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hey everybody, it's Josh here. Welcome to episode 6. This is an interview with a very close colleague of mine who is a legit world traveler. Noëlle Steegs. She splits her time now primarily between the Netherlands and South Africa. And over the past 6 or 7 years, she has traveled all over the world. And in this interview, we talk about that. We talk all about life, travel, and designing websites as a digital nomad. So if you are interested in traveling and doing web design remotely so you can travel and do your thing, or maybe it's something that you're doing right now and you want to do more of, or if you're stuck in one place and you just want to hear what it's like to be able to travel and do web design so you can live vicariously through Noëlle, this is your episode. This was a really great one because we talk about the ins and outs of traveling. We cover a lot of really important subjects, but not only between practical things like what gear to use and how to travel, but also safety. She was a single girl who was traveling all over the world. So we talk a little bit about safety and how to find good places to go and how to get connected with certain communities if you want to be a digital nomad, what that looks like as a single person versus somebody with a spouse or a significant other, or even with families who are digital nomads. So we had a really wide-ranging and awesome discussion. And for me, someone who is kind of placed in one place here in Ohio, it was really fascinating to hear about a world that is just completely different, which is the digital nomadic world, which is so cool. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. A couple of things I did want to mention. Noëlle had some troubles, mainly in the first half of the episode, with her Wi-Fi. So it was good enough to go live with it. I did not want to re-record anything because it was such a good talk. But there are some places where it gets a little bit laggy. So just be patient. The Wi-Fi connection did get much better in the last half of the episode. So there are a couple little spots where you're going to hear a little bit of lag and stuff. But again, I didn't want to re-record anything because it was such a good talk. Now, Noëlle has a fairly thick accent, but she speaks English very well. It's not her first language. She actually speaks multiple languages. But for those of you who would like to see subtitles with this, you can just watch the video on YouTube. You can just go to the show notes and all of the episodes, whatever the episode number is. In this case, it's episode 6. So you can just go to joshhall.co/006, and that'll take you to the show notes and the video and all the resources there. But I want to say hats off to Noëlle for doing this interview. She is trying to get more comfortable on camera and doing things like that. She's a natural introvert. So she was a little nervous coming on, but she did a really, really good job. And I think you guys are going to love this interview and get so much out of it. It was so cool. Before we dive in, this episode is brought to you by my Divi WordPress beginners course. You're going to actually find out in the episode because Noëlle is an expert with WooCommerce and UX, which is user experience, and a lot of that stuff. So I'm going to say, hey, this episode is brought to you by my Divi WooCommerce course. If you are using Divi and you need to build an online store, WooCommerce is the way to go. It's what I use for my site and all of our agency sites, and it's just an incredible platform. And I have a course that will walk you through start to finish how to start, plan, and build your site with Divi and WooCommerce, and will help you get you up and running. So without further ado, guys, enjoy my awesome and super, super interesting interview with a world traveler, a remote digital nomad, Noëlle Steegs. Noëlle, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today.
Hey, Josh, thanks so much for having me.
I'm really excited to talk with you because we're going to talk about something that I think a lot of people are probably a little bit envious and jealous of, and that is remotely working and being a digital nomad, which you totally are. So I know we're going to talk a lot about life and travel and your gear and things you do as a digital nomad, but I'm kind of curious. Before we get into that, how did you start in web design? Did you get into web design because you knew you wanted to have freedom and travel, or was web design kind of a byproduct of, traveling?
So web design came first. So the working remotely kind of happened as an accident, as a byproduct when I started out in web design. So being a digital nomad came later, and I thought, oh, this is useful. I can work from anywhere, so I might as well travel. So that really came later.
Okay. So when you started in web design, how did that come about? Because I'm not too familiar with your story on how it all started for you. Did you know you wanted to do design and web design, or how did that come about initially?
No, I definitely didn't know I would be in this industry. It came as a total lovely surprise to me. I one day got an idea for an online store, and it was just one of those ideas that I couldn't get rid of. You know, it would just sit in my head, and I would ponder it over. And that was when I just moved to South Africa, and I had time, and I had a very slow internet connection, and but I didn't have any resources to start online stores. So all I could do was to do everything myself. So I learned everything from setting up shipping in WooCommerce to doing search engine optimization, designing the logo myself. Like there was no other resources for me. So, there was only one way. And yeah, and through that, I mean, when I started out, I really didn't even know how to use Facebook properly. And this was now 6 years ago, about maybe 7 now. So I've learned so
Okay.
much since. Um, and then when I'd set up the online store and done some social media marketing for it as well, then a friend who was running a digital marketing agency, she saw what I'd done and she invited me to come work for her as her web designer and social media specialist. So then I worked for a year for her, and it was great. I learned so much in that time. But after a year, I decided to go freelance, and that's when it all started. And in the beginning, I did a mix of marketing and web design, but over time, I phased out the marketing and I fully focused on web design and development now.
Okay. Well, I'm curious, Noelle, what were you doing before that? Did you like what was when you traveled to South Africa? Did you have a different job at that time, or what were you up to before you got into web design?
Yeah, I was in fashion retail for years, and my last job that I had was I used to work for one of the big camera brands, first line technical support in a call center.
Oh,
Something
wow.
completely different. Yeah, so life has definitely changed for the better, I would say, and so unexpectedly so.
No doubt. From call center to web designer, that's got to be night and day difference as far as your day to day enjoying your work and enjoying life in general, I imagine.
Yes, yeah, no, for sure.
That's interesting because I'm always so curious about how people get into web design because every path is different. I've talked several times now with all interviews to where like nobody has a typical education, 4-year path. It seems like everyone is doing something completely different or, and then they just have an option to get into some sort of creative, whether it's graphic design or web design or social media, and then it just kind of blows up from there. So yeah, that's interesting how you got involved with all that. So I'm really curious. You were in South Africa, it sounds like when you started design. And then did you do enough on the side to realize like, you know what, I think I could do this like full time? Or how did that progression work for you?
Yeah, that progression was definitely the way I did it. It's not one I would recommend to others. To others, I would definitely recommend to plan and save up. And I had no savings at the time, and luckily my partner at the time brought in some income, so that did allow me for some freedom to start up something new. But it was the first years were beans on toast kind of years. It was tough starting out.
And
But of course, over time, it's accumulated, and now things are very comfortable. But the first years were really rough, and it's definitely not a path I would recommend. But I'm still happy I took it.
how old were you when you got into web design? I'm just curious.
I was, I must have been 22, and I'm
Okay.
28 now.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that's really interesting because that's about when I got into it as well. I think I was 23. And that's a great time to get. I mean, anyone can get into web design anytime, but that's definitely a good age when you don't have a family and too many responsibilities. And I imagine for you, were your costs mostly just travel and expenses because you didn't have a set you didn't have a mortgage or didn't have a place where you were tied down to. Is that kind of what the majority of your expenses were that you had to cover?
Yes, so in the beginning, I wasn't nomading then, so I was stationary, but it was just basic living expenses, which allowed me to keep costs low. So
Gotcha.
definitely not tied to a mortgage or any major costs or any major business costs for that matter.
Yeah. So tell me about just the digital nomad life in general, because it's something I'm very interested in. I don't foresee myself doing it now that with a wife, and I'll have my second baby on the way here very shortly. But for those who are curious, and for those who do travel and want to have more nomadic style life, like, where did all your travels take you? Did you have a couple locations that you generally visited, like at certain times of the year, or what did that look like for you when you really started, being a nomad?
So when I started out, one of the most memorable times for me was when I traveled the Mediterranean for 4 months, and I did a different island every month. So I visited Majorca and Malta and Sicily, and it was just it was just great. I just come from South Africa. I done the family round, so I visited everyone in the Netherlands. To continue about the time in the Mediterranean, that was really a special time for me because it was such a new experience. It was full of new impressions. It was full of meeting new people. Even though I consider myself to be an introvert, I would do digital nomad houses at the time, so co-working, co-living type style, and it just allowed me to come across people that I consider to be mine, which was something new for me to experience in life. I'd always kind of felt like an outsider before. And now I just felt like, hey, there are like so many people out there like me, so many people that are interested in tech and want to have beautiful experiences kind of on the side or over the weekend. And really met people that I'm still in touch with today. So that was definitely a highlight about the digital lifestyle.
No doubt. That's so interesting. Did you know where you wanted to visit, or did you just kind of like know people who said like, "Hey, you should check out this area or go to this country"? How, like, I'm curious. I just can't even imagine that as somebody in the States who, our version of traveling is driving down to a beach in Florida or something. Did you know about those locations, or were they destinations that you wanted to go to?
Most of the locations that I chose, I came across via Facebook, via digital nomad groups that I'm a member of, which is a great way to learn more about the lifestyle, by the way. And I can
Gotcha.
send you links to a couple that I recommend. But yeah, there I saw people raving about certain places or sharing photos and experiences, and then I thought, hey, I want to experience that too. So that's how it mostly came about. And then sometimes, like in the occasion of Sicily, I actually did I was looking for, because at the time when I started out, things were still a little bit on a shoestring. Is that the right expression? So I did a work stay exchange there. So that's also how I found locations, was based on, where can I really on a tight budget still have this experience, but trade my skills for a nice stay somewhere.
Okay, gotcha. Wow, that's interesting. Almost like a location trade agreement, barter agreement for a certain amount of time or certain, seasons.
Yeah, totally. And that's also when people say, oh, life as a digital nomad must be so expensive, or it must be so expensive to travel. You can actually make it as expensive or inexpensive as you want. If you're happy to, take flights at like 4 a.m. in the morning and don't mind the layover and things like that. And if you travel light, and then if you do agreements like that, it's surprising the incredible experience that you can have. But mm, while working with like a really tight budget.
Well, and it's interesting. I know you've done other things, like you're rocking the short hair. You cut your hair a while back. Were little things like that included too with your travels, just to make travel easier?
Yeah. chopping my hair off was definitely, it was a practical thing. I just dreamt from going for a dip in the ocean and coming out and doing this and then and being done. It was partially a practical thing. And also getting more rid of my possessions. I consider myself a minimalist. So again, I travel very light. I own relatively little, and I started out owning little already because I hadn't accumulated much yet at 22, but I started it down even further, and that just allowed me to just move really freely.
Gotcha. And you're a minimalist in your design too. It's interesting that your lifestyle and your path kind of reflects in your design, which is a really good thing. I think it's a compliment because we've worked together several times in the past and you design very efficiently and cleanly. And as you said, you're definitely a minimalist through and through, which I imagine you have to be as a digital nomad. You can't be tied to certain possessions or certain things unless you're, like rolling with a trust fund of a lot of money where you can just travel. I imagine you have to keep things intentionally, simplistic. I'm really curious. How did you balance work with traveling like that? Did you have set hours when you were at certain locations, or did you just do like segments of work in between your time with exploring and meeting new people? What did that look like for you?
Oh, in the beginning, that was definitely a challenge for me, because on one hand, you want to experience amazing things and connect with people, but you definitely have to be strict in making sure that this is work time and this is playtime, and be really flexible to move that around according to the place where you are, the people that you're sharing a house with. Kind of look at their rhythms as well, and you might want to adjust yours. You might want to adjust according to climate. I mean, for example, when I was staying in Malta, between say 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., there was no chance that you could do work because it would just be so hot and humid. So then I would start early before the heat would come up, have a siesta, and then work until like early evening, for example.
Oh, that's awesome. When you're traveling and stuff, I think one of the biggest questions I have and that most people have is, how do you get clients remotely? Because that's the typical standard approach to getting clients is like what I do with networking or a lot of local colleagues and your professional networks, and then it grows from there. Now, those in the Divi community, like you and I have connected, like we're connected with people all over the globe. But were most of your clients like that? Like how? Yeah, I guess the question is, how did you get clients working remotely?
When I started out, it was definitely a friends of friends kind of thing. So, just people I heard of that could use a little help in the digital marketing and with their websites. But then as things grew, it became part word of mouth. So that's just a blessing that's come my way. That's just come into my direction that I didn't have like a lot of influence on, or something that I just see as an amazing thing that's happened. But other than that, the Divi community is amazing, as you know, and being actively engaged in the Facebook groups and helping other Divi web designers out. That's definitely helped me a lot, and that's helped me get clients, scattered all over the world. And now I've actually gone in a bit of a more corporate direction, and that's mostly referrals. So right now there's a balance between white label work for other Divi web designers or agencies, and then more the corporate industry.
And that's one of the best. You just hit the nail on the head right there with where you're talking about helping other web designers. I think that's how we got connected, was in my Divi Web Designers Facebook group, where I saw you very actively helping people, particularly with WooCommerce and some of the areas that you have some specialty with. And yeah, that just goes such a long way, because you can basically get work, particularly white label work, which means, for those unfamiliar with that term, just like you said, it means you're basically working for other designers with their clients. But that's a great way to get remote clients. I mean, the corporate clients, where did they come from? Was that all word of mouth as well? Or I imagine you're not doing like advertisements or anything like that. How did some of the corporate clients come about?
A like my main client at the moment in the UK came about from a business owner who wanted to give Divi a try himself, and then went into a Divi Facebook group and said, I really want to do this myself, but it's more time consuming than I thought. So looking for someone to build the website, which I did. And then he was a project manager more in the corporate environment. So then when he project managed for what's now my client, and he heard that they needed a web presence, he recommended me. And I'm still very grateful for that, because this has ended up being quite a bit of recurring work. And I think maybe now 50% of my work I do for this client.
Awesome. I was just going to ask what the percentage was between corporate work and then more like, one-off or smaller projects for you. Because with your site, I mean, you have such good expertise with WooCommerce. I have some of the stuff that you've helped me out with WooCommerce. I'm like, hats off. That's some really cool stuff. Like, you have such a good arsenal of a lot of that. And you're very UX, user experience driven. Like, do you still take on a lot of those smaller one-off projects, or are you trying to more specialize on some of the niche, like corporate WooCommerce kind of things?
No, I still really enjoy the balance. I still really enjoy working with other Divi web designers. We'll see how it goes and in which direction it maybe pulls me more. But I like the balance between the two. But I'm definitely increasingly specializing in WooCommerce. And I'm working on a course by Rodolfo Malloy, businessbloomer.com, course. So that definitely allows me to dive deeper and just be able to dream up functionality and make it happen, versus being limited to the plugins out there, even though they are really good and there's a really beautiful range of them.
Right. Yeah. And I'm curious, do you tell your clients right away that you travel? Like, I imagine you're available, certain times of the week, and, obviously you get things done on deadlines and things like that. But are you very upfront with clients who, are curious about your schedule or timing? And because you could be in different time zones at any point if you're traveling. How do you go about that with clients?
Yeah, my clients do know that I travel, and most of them are actually really excited about it, and they love chatting about it or asking questions. Some of my clients actually travel regularly themselves, and my website just says, I'm available between these times. I'm in this time zone. But then also, if I meet a client and our time zone really differs, then I'm also happy to step out of my office hours for meetings and such, and just be flexible and accommodating. But it's never been a problem. I've worked with people from the States, from Europe, from Australia, and it's been fine. Yeah.
And thank goodness for things like this with Zoom or video calls and email and everything else. I mean, that's what's so cool about technology, and particularly with web design. Yeah, you can get clients from literally anywhere, and it's really incredible. So for somebody like you who travels, that's all. Isn't that crazy? Because like, you couldn't have done what you're doing now, even probably 10 years ago. Like, it may have looked completely different.
Yeah, exactly. No, I couldn't have imagined something like this happening. I think the digital nomad community is very new, really, and definitely upcoming. I believe I've seen some statistics about what they expect in terms of the growth of the digital nomad community. People working remotely. A lot freelancer based, that more and more people will freelance. I've seen predictions like that. I mean, I don't know how true they are, but the community is definitely growing. There's increasing interest. There's resources all over now. People can go and read up on people's experiences, how they went about it. So that's really great.
It's interesting that you said that, because I think more families are doing that too. I've heard on a couple of different podcasts that like smaller families are taking their kids and traveling with kind of more like digital nomadic kind of lifestyles, whether it's all across the globe or just like, just stateside. I know like one of my students in my business course, he just travels the States. He like travels all over, and they work out of their little trailer or whatever. Like, that is so cool. And that's one of the amazing things that web design brings us. What, like, other people that you met, what kind of work did they do? Were there other web designers? Were there people who did like social media? Like, I'm curious what other kind of jobs or whatever kind of pathways are out there that can allow for a digital nomad life?
I've met lots of different kinds, and that was definitely surprising to me as well when I got into the digital nomad lifestyle. Sure, there were definitely a lot of people in the tech industry, so designers, developers, copywriters, for example, as well. A lot of people working web, digital marketers. But then, for example, I came across this couple from the States, and both of them were freelance writers. But they were working on novels, and that was cool. But I've met people who did health coaching remotely. I've met psychics. I've met all kinds. All kinds.
Wow,
So much
that's
can
awesome.
actually be done remotely.
Yeah, and just with technology in so many different industries, yeah, I just think it's amazing. I love it, the fact that technology has just opened up the possibilities to do pretty much whatever the heck you want, wherever you want, which is awesome. Let's talk practically about gear. I'm sure a lot of people are really curious. Like, I imagine you don't haul around a huge iMac desktop with you. Like, are you running, I know you're a minimalist. You like keeping things simple and not too much to worry about. Do you just have a laptop, and do you bring like a router or a modem with you, or what's your gear setup look like?
I always bring a modem with me for just in case, that's the location where I end up, the Airbnb that I rent, that the Wi-Fi isn't as expected. I must always have a backup solution, so that's important. And then my laptop is really lightweight, and it was actually recently when I switched over to something that was really lightweight and strong, and mine is it's like military tested, so the outside is carbon. It's the Lenovo X1 carbon. So it's really rugged. I've seen commercials where it bounces off stairs and where it has, all kinds of like dust and heat and such. And because I like the outdoorsy lifestyle as well, that was quite important to me, that my laptop is powerful and light, but that also it can handle something,
Yeah.
And in terms of carrying everything around, of course, I want a backpack that's, really, really comfortable. And that's the perfect size for carry-on only, because when I travel Europe, I like to just grab and go and only have the one bag. And it has really nice compartments. The laptop fits in really snugly. It's nice and protected. It's the Everkey Atlas that I use. It has this lifetime warranty, so it's like it was a one-time investment, and I just know I'm set. So I'm really happy about that.
Gotcha. Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I have a huge mic with light. Well, obviously I'm doing, more podcasts and video kind of stuff now, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, how cool is that? A laptop that is going to be at least, built for travel, or at least have a case, right? That probably works, pretty well with keeping things protected. And then maybe if you can send me some of the links on stuff you have, that would be awesome. I'll link them in the show notes, because I'm sure people are curious about, even just going on vacation, you want to have some stuff, or, well, ideally not on vacation. You don't want to do too much work on vacation. But if you're going to be traveling for an extended amount of time, you want to have some stuff that's going to be reliable. Particularly, that's interesting about the router or whatever you're doing with Wi-Fi. Because I imagine if you go to some location, you may not know what to expect. And if you have a client that has a deadline or a project that needs to be worked on, you got to be prepared for that, right?
Yeah, always. And one thing that I would like to add to my gear is it's called the roof stand. I'm sure you get others, but it's basically this really thin and lightweight stand that you can put at any kind of height and put your laptop on. And then I would add like a Bluetooth keyboard, because one thing with laptops, of course, is, especially with desks of all different heights when you travel, you don't have your perfect comfortable setup like you have at home. So adding that will definitely be good for posture and such.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Just with chairs, like web design, we spend so much time in our chairs that you want something that is going to be comfortable. Because I've done that where at coffee shops, I love doing writing at coffee shops, and then like proposals and certain administrative tasks. I can't seem to I never have liked designing at coffee shops. I've always had to do that kind of creative work, like design work in my office in a more controlled environment. But like writing and stuff like that, I love. But I say that to say, if I'm doing that for a couple hours, sometimes I get up and I'm like, oh man, my back.
Yeah,
So
it's like
sometimes
that
I can only imagine.
completely.
Yeah,
And
that's it.
I think the co-working, co-living spaces, I think they're starting to up their game, but I've stayed at many where it was just not up to scratch. It was just not ergonomic, not comfortable. And now more and more are, based on feedback, they're making some changes. But yeah, it's
And it
definitely
can,
sometimes make do.
I imagine that would affect creativity, right? Both maybe positively if it's a really nice place and you're inspired, or maybe negatively if the Wi-Fi is terrible, it's, crummy and you feel uncomfortable. I imagine that's probably difficult to manage too, right? You're just balancing your creativity when you're in a new place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think creativity, it's not a steady stream. It's something that comes and goes and can be stimulated. But that's one of the things that I really like about work and travel at the same time. Like when I was staying in Mallorca, I was staying like 2 streets from the beach. So if I just felt like it wasn't flowing, I could just take half an hour, just walk down the beach, sit in the sand, listen to like a Spanish guy playing the guitar and sip a cold drink and just watch the waves come in. And it would just really recharge me, in like
Oh
a
my
little
gosh.
moment like that.
I'm so jealous of that. Just talking to you, being from Ohio, where it just snowed today. So, which I'm all right with snow and stuff, but I definitely would love to be closer to the beach one day for sure. That's fascinating, though. Like, yeah, wow, that's really cool. From a creativity perspective, that you can do that. I know. I've had to really think about that working from home for so long now that I've worked from home for almost a decade, almost 10 years. Like, I intentionally get out of my office throughout the day, whether it's just to take my dog for a walk or whether it's to do something now that I have a daughter, like just see her for a little bit, or like I said, go to a coffee shop, or sometimes my wife and I, like, we'll go out to lunch and we'll drop our daughter off with the grandparents to get out for a little bit. Like, I think it's really, really important because particularly for creativity, I've found that if you stay in one place, like literally just one place for too long, unless you're really just feeling inspired and good about a project, like it doesn't take too long before you get restless and you got to get up and you got to move and
Yeah,
you got to do something. I think that's a danger with home offices and people who work from home, because when you're in an office at a location or a corporate place, like there's still other people to talk to, and there's, you can get up and go down to the lobby and get a coffee or something. But when you're working from home, that's much more difficult because sometimes you're isolated, sometimes you're, stuck in one little
totally.
room, and it's really, that's kind of dangerous. So did that, as a digital nomad, did that kind of help that you were getting, even though you didn't have the same, did you travel with other people or was it just you? Because you didn't have the same group of friends that you stayed with, right? Or what did that look
Yeah,
like?
that's right. I've always traveled solo, which I enjoy, but then I also like to tap into meeting people, and co-working, co-living spaces. That really helped with that. And then,
Yeah.
so then during the week, I would do my own thing. I would be very focused on work. And then over the weekend, someone would say, "Hey, I'm going to this island nearby. Do you want to come?" And then, you would just connect like that. And then, have your people, have your creativity stimulated, and then recharge, and then on Monday, get back into things and just feel like really ready for it.
No doubt. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. A quick little island trip to recharge. That sounds pretty recharging to me for sure. What did you do? I'm curious, like safety wise, as a
Mhm.
younger gal who's traveling across the world, do you have any things that you did as far as just to make sure that you were safe, or would you have any recommendations, particularly for women who want to be a digital nomad? Because I imagine that can be something that, I mean, that's something serious to consider. Like, yeah, what did you do to make sure you were safe? And between travel, air travel, new places, yeah, like what did that look like? What did you do there?
That is really a really good question. Just general, being streetwise. So making sure that when I walk around, that there's quite a lot of people, that it's well lit. Sometimes, especially in South Africa, I will choose having a private taxi rather than the public transport, especially when traveling with my gear. I want to be really safe. And yeah, just also sometimes that people know where I am, like, like friend or family would know where I would be traveling, and they would have the address as well. So I have a very lovely, lovely and sometimes concerned dad who asks me every time I'm traveling to send him the address, because he's like, if you get lost, I'll know where to start. So yeah, so I do that, which helps. And yeah, just common sense, trying to not to carry too much on me and just be discreet, trying not to look like the lost tourist with a map wandering about, yeah.
Interesting. Wow, those are really good practical things just for any type of traveling. I'm hoping that my daughter doesn't watch this one day and want to become a digital nomad, because I can relate to your dad. I don't know if I want her traveling across the world by herself, but obviously you've done it efficiently and effectively. I mean, have you ever had any scary situations or anything that that kind of scared you traveling alone, or has it been pretty smooth sailing for the most part?
Yeah, it has been pretty much smooth sailing. I mean, I did have one experience in Cape Town, but it was not really when I was nomading or something. And yeah, things just happen. People take chances. But in general, I must say, like, my experience has been really good. And people do ask me, "Oh, you travel solo? Isn't that scary?" I find it very freeing and liberating. And I'm definitely not this hugely brave person or fearless or anything like that, but it's been fine. And then also, I guess it depends a lot on the location that you travel, but I've traveled mostly, when not in South Africa, I've traveled mostly in Europe, and I would say it's relatively safe. I mean, something can happen anyway, really, but yeah, just with
Sure.
common sense, it's actually really fine.
That's great. That's really good stuff. I think it'll be super beneficial for even just those practical things you mentioned about, like, not looking like a tourist with, somebody who in a place where, obviously they don't know where they are. I imagine that can put you in a very, very vulnerable situation, but it sounds like you kind of learn a lot of those important things along the way. Um, so I'm very curious. When you started being a digital nomad, did you have any idea like how long you wanted that to last? Because I know you're doing less travel now, right? Now that
Yeah, that's
it sounds like
right.
you're not doing as quite as much. What's the plan moving forward? Like, I guess that's a question. How long do plan on being a digital nomad? Do you think you'll settle down one day, or what does that kind of look? I'm just curious about, the pathway, because it's a lot easier in my situation to, start a family, get a house, and kind of settle down. Whereas a digital nomad lifestyle, I don't even know how you plan for that. Do you just go until you're burnt out or tired of traveling, or did you kind of plan to do it for a certain amount of years? What did that look like?
I don't really plan to do it. I don't have a set plan of how long I want to do it for. I've always said to myself, just as long as it feels right to me. And the topic of settling down has definitely been something that's been on my mind recently. Because I do travel less. I travel more within the country now. So I travel more within South Africa. Like, I will swap between, say, countryside and city life every now and again and things like that. But I'm finding myself, even though it's really nice to have the freedom, I do find myself kind of daydreaming of having a home of my own, just something to make my space.
Hmm.
Because when traveling, you're always in somebody else's space, really, and it can get quite impersonal, maybe. Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. I don't have set plans to settle down within a certain time frame, but I do think it will happen soonish. But I would still love to have my travel experiences, but I would just have a base then.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah, I was so curious, just like if you had, like, I'm going to do it till I'm 30, or I didn't know, what that would look like. Which, that's a good point. If you follow your instinct and you follow kind of where your heart is, I think you'll know, whether it's time to transition and to do something more stable, or maybe like you're doing right now, you're doing less traveling than you were, a handful of years ago. I'm curious, like, on a personal level, you mentioned that you had a partner earlier on. Like, is that tough when you're traveling to have, like, to maintain a relationship with somebody? Like, do they come with you, or was it more like, I'm going to be a digital nomad during my single years? What I'm just from a personal perspective, I think it's kind of so foreign to me that I'm curious about the mindset with all that. Like, how did that work?
Yeah, it definitely comes with its challenges. So when I had a partner at the time, luckily he was really open-minded, and we just like for example, for the 4 months that I was in the Mediterranean, we just stayed in touch lots. And I kind of said, like, I'll take you along in my pocket and I'll share all these moments with you. And, we would chat almost daily. And yeah, and that really helped. Sure, it's not easy to do a long distance relationship, but it's very much possible. I must say I do envy the couples who nomad together. That seems really wonderful to me. Even though I've always enjoyed traveling solo, I just wonder what it's like to be able to, say to someone who's so close to you, like, oh, look at that, or really, kind of like plan together and enjoy special moments together. That must be really nice. And I have met digital nomad couples as well on my travels, and it just seems like such a cool experience to me.
Yeah. Did he have a full-time job, and was he like stationary at that time when you traveled, or? Yeah, because I
Yeah.
didn't even think about that. That's crazy.
Yeah,
But he
yeah.
was
So
he was just
it's all doable. It
yeah.
just it takes lots of communication and lots of trust, I guess, that you need to build up in order to feel comfortable with that. It's definitely possible, especially when it's not. If it was an indefinite thing, then I would say, like, okay, I'm going now. Don't exactly when I'm going to be back. But if you have a date, you can work towards that. And yeah, right.
Gotcha. Wow, that's fascinating. That's really really interesting. And then yeah, I imagine. Did you ever encounter any families like with kids or anything in your nomad stays and your travels?
Yes, I have a few, and that's been really special to witness. I think it's an amazing gift for children to travel at a young age, and I mean it's something that's that's not done a lot yet, and of course it comes with its own challenges, I'm sure. But I met a single mom, for example, who's traveling with her two kids, and I think they were like, I don't know, like maybe like 8 and 11 or something like that. And they would join in everything. They would hike. They would be so comfortable in nature. They were keeping up with the adults. It was like they were so smart in that way. So wereldwijs, like we would say in Dutch, so like at home in the world. And that was amazing to see for me. And they must have such a different outlook on the world than versus children who haven't traveled, who must hear it from stories and books and the news and things like that. To shape your own view of the world so early must be incredible.
Absolutely.
But
Oh, that's awesome. That's
but
so valuable.
definitely definitely comes with challenges. I understand, and I'll have a look for you as well. There's a link of a family that really brings out resources and connects nomad families with each other, and they are really amazing. But they said they will do like a slow nomadic lifestyle, so they make a point of staying in one spot for at least 3 months, because then they can kind of like get to know other children a bit and arrange play dates, and they can look for like aftercare spots and things like that. I haven't really met any digital nomad families that would travel fast-paced. Like I know some single digital nomads, for example, that change location every week or something like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I imagine for a family that's just not only is it impractical, but I'd say it's virtually impossible with kids, depending on, where they're staying and how comfortable they are in that place. But yeah, I imagine like just the amount of time is stretched out further than it would be for somebody who's single who can just up and go, because you can't just up and go with kids. We learned that very quickly. Like, my wife and I, before having kids, we could, hey, let's go out to dinner. Cool. We're out the door. Well, with kids, it's like, hey, let's go out to dinner. Cool. Oh, we got to feed the baby. We got to make sure we get her clothed and changed. And it's just a whole different experience. So I imagine that's like magnified as a digital nomad. Do you foresee yourself like
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of,
sure it is.
because right now you're doing less traveling. Do you plan, like in the immediate future, the next couple of years, do you plan on just splitting time within like a couple different locations, or what does that look like in the near future?
In the near future, so right now I'm in the South African countryside, and my visa is going to run out like early March. So then I'll travel to the Netherlands. and I'll go and, do the family round. So I'll spend like about a week at each family member. I'll go visit my mother in New York in the UK. And then depending on how life goes, I might either add a location. I've been eyeing Tenerife, another volcano. I really love the experience of Sicily, of visiting Mount Etna there. So that's the reason why I want to visit Tenerife. But South Africa just keeps pulling me back. It is such a special place. I love the people. They are so warm and spontaneous, and the nature here is just stunning. And I love my sunshine. So, and also currency exchange rate wise, it's also, it's beneficial. So I can very well see myself just, popping over to see family, spend a month there, and then return to South Africa again, because it's just over the past 7 years, even though it wasn't planned, it just kept pulling me back every time.
That's an interesting point too, as far as the exchange with the currency and everything, because if you're billing in a certain currency, then that, as far as like with people thinking traveling super expensive, it's like, yeah, well, if you're staying somewhere where the cost is like a third of the dollar or whatever you're normally paying, then yeah, you could potentially do really well. You could make less in your business for a month if your expenses are way down. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, totally. That's also why Southeast Asia is so popular amongst digital nomads, because your money stretches really far there, and you can stay at beautiful accommodation for prices that in the States or in Europe, it's just, you can't compare. So that's definitely, the exchange rates is definitely a thing. And Tim Ferriss, someone who I follow, he speaks about the concept of the new rich, which means it's not so important what you have in your bank account. It's the kind of lifestyle that you can afford with what is in your bank account. So, for example, a CEO who's stationary somewhere, who's very bound by time, bound by location, who has a lot in the bank but doesn't get the chance to get away and have new experiences, for example, versus someone who is free to travel and can stay in luxury accommodation, but their bank account might be only a fraction of what the stationary CEO gets in, that kind of concept. So that's what I really like as well, is just looking at opportunities to get the best lifestyle possible for my money.
Wow, that's really good. It kind of echoes what this podcast is all about. It's creating a web design business so that you can have the freedom to have the lifestyle you love, whether that is, in my case, like supporting my wife, going to have 2 daughters very shortly, got a hungry, precious golden retriever. Like, those are the things I'm supporting, but that's much different for you. Like, if you can support your travels and you can go to certain places like that, it's amazing that, yeah, it's about lifestyle more than it is about security or about a certain dollar amount or a certain dollar figure. I think it's one of the biggest, I'm really glad you said that, because that's one of the biggest things, particularly for people who are getting into any industry, but particularly web design. Like, I know when I got started, I looked at people who were making 6 figures and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that. Or I feel like an imposter because I'm only making like 20 grand or, something like that. Whereas, it doesn't matter. It's the lifestyle you want. I think that's such a really important topic. And I think more people nowadays are aware of that. Like, somebody who looks really successful and has a lot of money, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily successful from a standpoint of like loving life. I think that's a really good point. Like,
exactly.
You don't have to be rolling to be happy and to feel content and fulfilled. I mean, obviously you want to make enough to be able to pay your bills and to do what you need to do. But yeah, apart from that, like, I think that's where a certain dollar amount, I've said this a couple times before, but a local colleague of mine was making about double what I did last year. And part of me was like, I feel like I could be doing more. I should be making more. But the trade-off was that he was working 80 to 90 hours a week. And I'm a 35. Yeah, I'm a 35 to 40 at most. Like, I've worked a little more recently with everything going on leading up to the second baby, arriving here. But like next year in particular, I'm really going to work on setting more standards and guidelines as far as my hours and things like that. Because yeah, I would rather make like 100 or 150,000 a year and work 35 to 40 hours opposed to making 300 or 350, a year and then working 90 hours a week. That's just, yeah, it's such an important trade-off that I'm not willing to, like, time is everything. Time is the
Yes.
most valuable resource. Yeah. And you got to use it wisely.
Exactly. This is something that I keep saying as well. Time is the most precious. You can get more money, but you cannot get more time. So
Are you
spend it
glad?
wisely.
You seem like you're pretty fulfilled and happy with your life path. Like, are there ever times where you wish you would have settled down instead of traveling, or do you feel like I'm glad I've done that? I'm glad I did the nomad lifestyle.
No, I'm very happy. I'm very happy I did. I've never regretted it, and I haven't had. I wish I would have settled down, but it's definitely something like, I am looking forward in a way to one day settle down, and have a space of my own. And also moving to South Africa in the beginning, it was such a huge leap. I mean, I'd never flown before, I'd never seen the country before, nothing like that, and it was probably the most important decision I ever made.
And I think I imagine when you do settle down more, it'll probably help you appreciate it more, because I found a lot of people who I went to like high school with, they went to high school, they never left Ohio or never got out. And then they got a 4-year degree and now they're working in a job that they don't like. And they're just like stuck here. The most travel they ever did was to go down, and drove to a beach a few states down. Like, I feel glad in my ways too, just because I traveled with my band. We didn't do any we didn't do any traveling like out of the country, but we did go all over the states, which is a crazy travel in itself. Like us going out west would be the equivalent of like you from the Netherlands going to like Russia. Like there's it's basically like going to almost different countries in the US. I didn't really think about that until recently when I realized the relation of like distance between people who travel from like the UK down to Germany or whatever. Like that would be like us going to the state over, or a couple states over. And I say that to say I feel glad that I kind of not got that out of my system, that I experienced that and I did that, because even now we're very stationary and we don't travel too much right now, but I'm very glad that we did that. And now it's
Yes.
now it's like, and we're going to travel more when time allows and finances allow. But yeah, I'm glad we did it. And it sounds like you're in that place as well.
Yes, I'm very happy with my lifestyle at the moment. I feel the opposite of stuck. I feel very free. It's lovely to be able to make these decisions on the fly now. But I'm sure that one day everything will get a bit more, just more settled down and more constant, and then that's okay too. And then who says that is permanent? Like you never know. You never know what life's.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like I imagine you've matured and learned so much just the past, 6 years that you've been doing that, that you probably have a whole different, view and look of the world with, where you're at right now. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like traveling as a digital nomad and also moving to South Africa has kind of helped me grow up, like high speed, like fast forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, Noelle. Well, wow. We've covered some really cool things. I mean, we talked about how you got into web design, being in South Africa, and kind of you're, coming from a retail corporate background. That's kind of cool. That's kind of crazy. I didn't realize that. And then, we've covered some really good things with how to travel safely, the gear you use, which, if you could send me some of those links, I'll put those in the show notes for people who are curious.
For sure.
We talked about the pros and cons of doing the digital nomad life and some things to think about with that. What would you say, like, if you had to encourage somebody who wanted to be a digital nomad or is thinking about doing more traveling and doing web design, like, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to connect with people who are living the lifestyle and, ask a lot of questions. I mean, the Facebook groups that are out there, and they're very large, the digital nomad ones, and I'll make sure to send you some links. But just being in there and connecting with others that are already doing it and sharing those experiences, and people in there are so helpful. So when you're new to the topic, you just have this wealth of information on your fingertips, and people are they're always keen to help each other out and understand the lifestyle better, and maybe help pick your next destination, or help you set up or what to think about. There are excellent blogs out there as well, so definitely research, connect with people, because there's just a wealth of information out there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, if you could send those, that'd be awesome. I'm sure people are curious who want to travel. So, wow, Noelle, this has been a really cool talk. We've covered some really cool stuff. I'm like I said, part of me is I'm very satisfied with where I'm at in life with my previous travels, but part of me is a little envious with the ability to travel somewhere and then just walk to the beach if I'm feeling uninspired, or go to a quick trip on an island. That sounds amazing. So, hats off to you for following your heart and doing everything. You kind of gave a final, I was going to ask you for a final thought. Is there anything else you'd like to share in regards to being a digital nomad before we wrap up?
Yeah, like one thing I did want to mention is just, traveling is absolutely lovely. It's incredibly rewarding, but people shouldn't underestimate that it also takes energy. It can be quite, depending on what kind of pace you travel, it can be quite time and energy consuming to make the decisions about where am I going next, which flights am I booking, which Airbnb am I booking, is my Wi-Fi going to be okay? And I've actually had moments where that led to kind of like a decision fatigue. So I've become much more careful about that. And that's also why I like being in a location, say, like a month at a time versus high-paced travel. I mean, the one person will experience this more than the other, but it's definitely something to take into consideration. Like, you almost got to slot in time in your calendar to do your planning.
That's a really good point. Even just if you're switching time zones, or if there's jet lag, there's all that travel fatigue. Like, that's a really good point. I didn't think about that. But for those who are traveling week to week, like, you're going to have to allow for a day or two just to get caught up. Not only are you getting used to a new location, but you're getting settled in. And then, by the time you would be working, then it's probably time to go to the next one. So that's interesting that, you'd almost need to plan and account for those off days, we'll call them. And then, everyone experiences it where you travel, like if we drive 15 or 16 hours, which is not uncommon. I know most people, I have a friend in the UK who was like, dude, you guys are nuts for travel, for driving that long. Whereas everyone in Europe flies. We're like stateside, give us a 17, 18 hour drive. It's no big deal. But after that, like, I'm spent. The first day we get to vacation, I'm like, oh man, I'm freaking tired. You got to
relax before your vacation starts.
Yeah.
And you got to, you got to plan in time for that as well. And I, for example, when I arrive at the destination for a month or so, I always like to plan in a day. I mean, I prefer to plan my travel so that I arrive on a weekend day. That's ideal, because then you can really set up. But otherwise I must plan an off day or an off afternoon at least to just, settle in, get my fridge stocked up, unpack, and just kind of have a walk around, see where the supermarket is, get a bus ticket, those kind of things. And then I know that the next day I can just, tuck into work, and I know I'm sorted.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really
have
good.
That little adjust moment,
I didn't even think about that with traveling, that, it's particularly abroad and through different countries and stuff. There's so many of those little things that need to be factored in. I really appreciate you mentioning that, because that's probably something a lot of people don't think of when it comes to traveling. That's really, really cool. Awesome, Noelle. Exactly. Any other final thoughts? Anything you wanted to mention? Otherwise, I think we've covered some really cool stuff here.
I think so too. I really enjoyed the chat with you, Josh. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Awesome, Noelle. Absolutely. Thanks for your time and for chatting with us today. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this, and I'm sure we'll do another one here sometime soon.
That would be wonderful. Have a great day.
Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.